Welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 156 review. This was a regular 2-week sprint. As usual, I will give the overview. Harpreet will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, Joe on the platform, and Alberto on the API. So this sprint, we had a drop in the number of both pull requests merged and opened. There are some members of the team who are getting reassigned to other projects, and that probably accounts for some of the drop-off here. And if we review the spread of the pull requests, 22 were bugs, 52 were enhancements. So we're working on building the Losker branch at this point, and focused on new features in Upstream Master. With that, I will turn it over to Harpreet.
Thank you, Oleg. Hello, everyone. Total of 14 PRs were merged across UI repos. There were 6 enhancements, 3 refactoring PRs, 1 form conversion to React, and so on. With that, next slide, please. So in previous sprints, we converted Unified Control Explorer into individual submenus. So during this sprint, we have put back all the links between those objects back. For an example, I have a screenshot here of a policy details screen that has links to its conditions, events, actions, and policy profiles that this policy belongs to. For a detailed list of the links, you can see the PR. Next slide, please. Cloud volume delete functionality was enhanced. A new option to force delete the objects was added to the delete modal. Next slide, please. And the support to be able to define volume mapping was added. So on the list views, you should be able to see this new define a new volume mapping button. And next slide, please. Also during this sprint, templates accordion was moved out of Ansible Tower Explorer to its own second level menu item. There is a direct URL on the screen for this new screen. And with that, over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. For providers this sprint, on Amazon, we fixed a bug that was causing the Smart State Agent Coordinator worker to be constantly restarting on Podified. This was due to the fact that the queue name was mismatched between what it was expecting and what it was actually setting. And so it was constantly thinking that it had to stop and restart the worker. We also fixed a bug where if a user deleted the built-in unknown flavor, it was causing targeted refresh to fail. This is because we were doing a database lookup instead of pulling it from the collector. So that was resolved. As Harpreet mentioned, AutoSD added support for safe delete. This was a new option in core on cloud volumes, and they also implemented it in their provider. What this does is it allows waiting for a volume to be unmapped by any target host before deleting it to make sure that it's not causing any problems. For Azure, we improved the performance of the check to see if the Insights resource provider is enabled. This feature on Azure is required for us to be able to do event catching and metrics. And essentially, MIQ Server was making an Azure API call every 15 seconds when it was doing sync workers for the event catcher if you added an Azure worker. So what we're doing now is we added a capabilities column to the EXE management system. And so we check it during credential verification and persist it to the database. So this greatly improves the performance of that sync workers call when you have an Azure provider added. Also recently, Microsoft deleted a metric counter that we were using for the metrics capture, which was the per disk read and write per second. What they ended up doing was instead of having it as a rate, they had an absolute value, so they had a gauge for that particular interval. So we started using the new metric going forward. Next slide. Oleg, you want to go to the next slide?
He just told me his
He's got blue jeans issues, yeah.
I've been having blue jeans issues all morning.
Sounds like a personal problem, Joe.
I was just going to say that.
Sorry, gang, my blue jeans just crashed. Let me just restart the recording and we'll post both somehow.
I think it might still be recording.
Can it? Yeah, good. Okay, so let me just reshare. Ready? Go ahead, Adam.
Next slide.
All right, you want to go to the next slide? Yeah. There we go, cool. Okay, so for IBM Cloud VPC, we switched to using a new VPC Ruby SDK, which is an Open API gem. So this is automatically built based on the VPC Open API specification. We also, on the Power VS side, added DDF forms for creating cloud subnets and fixed a bug where a new Power VS region isn't following the standard rule for the endpoint based on the region name. And so Jay added a similar feature as we have on Amazon, which allows you to add additional regions in settings. And so that allowed us to fix this weird case up by adding it in settings. On the OpenStack side, we replaced host validate destroy with the supports feature mixin. So really trying to whittle down the number of places that are using the availability mixin and replace them all with supports feature mixins. Next slide. And the big one this sprint, we added Oracle Cloud support. So currently this is doing discovery of Oracle Cloud resources, cloud tenants, availability zones, VMs, etc. Have a little bit of networking and storage support as well for discovery. Oracle actually had an official Ruby SDK gem, so we're using that OCI Ruby SDK. And it's been added to the gem file, and you can go and add it and test it out if you want. And that is it for providers. Next slide.
Very good, Adam. Thank you. So this sprint, 20 PRs were merged across the platform space. And this slide highlights the most noteworthy, starting with bugs. Jason fixed one related to seeding Ansible Galaxy roles. He also fixed a bug where database connectivity checks would fail if the database was not running at all. And Libor fixed a bug in the tag group feature of chargeback reports, which was an issue when the metric rollups didn't have any tag names. For enhancements, Alberto contributed a couple. The first will allow for the support of a custom operator lock name by reading it from an environment variable instead of using the hard-coded lock name of a ManageIQ operator lock. And he contributed another that will allow the HTTPD pod for authentication to auto-restart when authentication configuration changes are detected. Brandon enhanced the operator documentation to add an install step for creating a namespace if the user doesn't have one, and he added an uninstall step description. I contributed an enhancement to support Kafka server configuration choosing IP addresses instead of DNS resolvable host names, and to unify two different client configurations that we had in the appliance console for Kafka. And Joe R added a neat enhancement that will improve the podified idle CPU usage per worker. And if you go over to the next slide, we have an image that was put together by Thad Jennings. Indicated by the blue bars in this image, the podified version was using a lot of idle CPU. And after Joe R's change, the podified version will align with the CPU usage as shown in orange for the appliance. So a big improvement there. And that's it for the platform space. On to Alberto for the API.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, in this sprint we had about, I think, 4 enhancements that came in. The first one by Lucy. She added the simulate policy action, and as you can see here, you can target multiple VMs here. Request VM power off. with the targets, or you can individually do a simulate policy on a single VM. Next slide, please. Lucy also added support for ISO images. So we have in the endpoint API ISO on the bar images. Here doing the query or the individual resource. You can also do the bulk query, and as well as editing a single ISO image or doing a bulk edit of those. Next slide, please. Yep. So following up on the enhancement for safe delete here, Gregory added the action of safe delete on cloud volumes, showing here running. Well, you can do the safe delete on an individual resource or doing the bulk, and essentially showing the example here, sending the safe delete on a resource, and you get the async response with a task ID and href that you can query until it's done. Next slide, please. Okay, and finally, David added he enhanced the options for cloud subnets. So for an individual provider, shown here with the EMS ID parameter, you get back the create and edit form. That's available. That can be done via the UI for that. And that's it for the API.
All right. Well, thanks very much, everyone. We'll be back in 2 weeks on March 17th for Sprint 157. And with that, I'd like to thank all the contributors, all the presenters, and everybody else in the community for another great sprint. Thanks, everyone.